Hi everyone, welcome to Agile Expertise. Once again, it's lovely to see you, and it's always so wonderful to see some familiar faces here. So today I'm going to be joined by the wonderful Jeffrey Lipworth and Alistair Corrie. Some of you may or may not have heard of these people. I certainly have for a very long time and have always admired and been inspired by their work, in particular the work around the inner game. Now, my little story around the inner game comes from a time when I was starting my work world and entering the world of development. And I found myself working with other people and collaborating with them, sitting with them side by side and building our code, for example, together, i.e. doing peer reviews, or bringing in a group together to brainstorm and pull ideas together. When I used to do that back in the day, I actually got told off for it, and I was accused of not understanding what I was doing, hence why I was pulling in on other people to capture their knowledge. However, today we all know that in an agile way, collaboration is key, working together is key, and it's always like a beautiful way of working together. And actually, we get a lot more done by working in this way. So I came to realize that I had the inner game long before I even realized it. So I'm not going to babble on too much. I'm going to hand over to Alistair to introduce himself, and also hand over to Jeff to introduce himself. And we'll take it from there. Over to you, Jeff.
Well, thank you. And hello, it's nice to see everybody. Thanks for coming. Ready to get your minds blown this morning, this afternoon, this evening, because inner game is one of the best kept secrets. And Alistair and I are very excited to find out the inner relationship between Agile and inner game. They're just kind of meant for each other. And you're one of the first people in the world ever hearing about this synergy. So I think you're going to be hearing about it a lot more. A little bit about myself. The inner game was originally discovered as a way to learn tennis. And back in the 70s, I was an aspiring tennis pro. I read The Inner Game of Tennis, the book, which is today the best-selling inner game book. And it just transformed me, transformed my tennis, my outlook at life. I just had to meet the author, Tim Gallwey. And I met him, actually, was Florida. We became good friends. And now I didn't make it in the pros. So I had to get a real job. And I ended up in sales. As the years went by, I ended up being vice president of the company that hired me. And I got in touch with Tim and said, I have a sales force of over 100 people under me. Why don't we try applying your inner game principles to selling, and we could use my sales force as a laboratory? And Tim said, great idea. So Tim and I, you could show the first slide, by the way, if you'd have
Yeah, let me start.
if you like. Okay. That's a picture of myself and Tim Gallwey holding up my book, which is called Selling to the Point. And it's basically the inner game applied to sales performance. So if any of you work for companies that have sales forces or know people in the selling profession, what I'm going to be introducing today, in fact, we also have a whole application for selling. So be glad to talk to you about that after this presentation. We can stay in touch, and Chatel's going to share all my contact information. Okay, so what we've been noticing in the world of Agile, you might have heard about this, is that people are talking now about reimagining Agile or realigning Agile or even renaming Agile, because it seems that Agile has developed to the point where it's at a crossroads where we don't want the Agile bureaucracy to get in the way of actually practicing Agile in an Agile way. And it's just human nature. And we pretty much identified the source of the problem. And we also have a solution. That's a good combination when you have a source of the problem, but you also have a solution at the same time. And here it is. Originally, humans defined what Agile was. Now, Agile is being defined for humans. So it's about the Agile mindset itself is what's being overlooked. Agile's not just about completing a task. It's also about the evolution of mindset that results from completing tasks and how to develop that Agile mindset in the most agile way is what Inner Game is about. Because Inner Game is about learning in a way that's constantly fresh and new. The initial, if you could picture when Agile was initially discovered, when it was evolving, when people were first finding out there's a better approach to reaching the desired outcomes that we want. It was very exciting. Okay. In the early days of developing Agile, there was a lot of discovery. And in the discovery, there was a lot of learning. Now, when I say the word learning, it usually doesn't bring up positive connotations. You know, people are thinking about studying and homework and tests. But this kind of learning actually was fun because it involved new discoveries all the time of this approach to solving problems, which later became called Agile. And people created the elements, the frameworks of Agile as new needs were revealed. And so the process of things like sprints and retrospectives, they didn't exist at first. There was a process where they were created. And if you go to slide number 3, I'll show you the process. Okay. This is the Inner Game performance formula for peak performance. And we're going to be talking a lot about peak performance today because that's ultimately what Inner Game is about. But this is the process for peak performance towards any task, and it includes the development of Agile. Because what would happen is that people during the process of fulfilling a project would observe, hey, wait a minute. There's I don't know if somebody has a question, maybe we could hold that to the end and then I can answer them at the end. Okay. So to complete a task, there was an element of observation where somebody observed that a few of the steps that we're taking could be unnecessary and could be wasteful and could actually be interfering. They would learn, well, if we just did a sprint and jumped into the project and later did a retrospective, we could learn from our observation and then perform in a better way. So observation, learning, performance. As we become better observers, we become better learners. And as we become better learners, we become better performers. And this applies to achieving any task, whether it's tennis, whether it's golf or skiing, and it also applies to Agile. You'll see at the very bottom, an Inner Game coach is essentially an observation coach. So a lot of the Agile mindset that we talk about that people develop over time is about observation. It's about seeing things in a different way as we become better versed in Agile and looking at things in an Agile way. Now, at the beginning, when Agile was being discovered, it was all about learning. There was no teaching because there wasn't a well-defined framework for Agile yet. Those principles weren't developed, so there was nothing to be taught. It all had to be learned at first. And it was being discovered as they went along. And would you say that the process of discovering Agile was done in an Agile manner? Yeah. And imagine how fun and exciting it would have been to be a part of that process. Now, flash forward to Agile today. People aren't being oriented to Agile the same way that they were. Now, there's a well-defined Agile framework and elements and practices and principles. And what's important is now the principles are being taught. And when they're being taught, people are trying to learn them. Now, put a pin in that word trying, because we're going to get to that and how trying to learn is very different than learning. People are judged based on how well they know these principles. And it's no longer about discovery. Now it's about getting caught up to speed to what other people already know. And you start out feeling inadequate because you want to catch up to other people who have a better command of Agile, and you envy them. And people are being preferentially recruited for teams based upon how many Agile certifications they have. It's very different. It's a different mindset. And so have a little chart. If you go to slide 4. Yes, okay. So you can see on the left-hand side, when Agile was being discovered, you have things like learning. There's no teaching because there's no Agile yet to be taught. It's being discovered. The learning is fun. There's excitement because we're discovering a new way to approach things. And most importantly, at the bottom, there's no expectations. In today's Agile, we're trying to meet expectations. But when Agile was being discovered, there weren't any expectations because there was no Agile yet. And that creates a significant mindset difference. See, Agile mindset is inner, and the completion of the task is outer. And both are happening simultaneously. That while you're completing the task, you're also evolving a mindset so that as somebody has a lot of experience completing tasks in an Agile manner over the years, they develop, they have a more evolved Agile mindset. So both things are happening simultaneously. And if you're saying, what's the desired outcome? Well, there's really two desired outcomes. An outer desired outcome, which is completing the task, and an inner desired outcome, which is evolving one's Agile mindset that also takes place in the process. And what I'm going to pose to you today is you may be focusing on the wrong one. Okay, they're both important. The outer, completing the task, is important, and evolving one's Agile mindset is also important. But there's one of those two that need to be your priority. And that's what I'm going to be looking at today. And that's where inner game comes in. Now, let me show you the very first Agile thing that you ever did in your life. Ready for the walking video? There we go. Okay, isn't he cute? Uh, so what I want to bring together is a few of the things, a few of the elements that we saw at the beginning stages of Agile, like learning, discovery, fun. And we just saw with the child learning to walk. It's the same set of elements, isn't it? There's discovery, there's fun, there's learning, there's excitement. What would happen if you tried to teach that child to walk? It would interfere, wouldn't it? Right? Because you're saying what would happen if you try to teach them, oh, put this foot in front. No, 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 you got to keep your balance. Okay, try it again. Now this time put the other foot in front, but no, 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 don't lean. It would interfere and it wouldn't be fun because you would have changed the task from learning to walk to trying to learn to walk. Because now you've introduced judgment, you've introduced expectation, and it completely changes the learning process, and it's no longer as agile. Now, you might say that now that Agile's become more institutionalized, it became less agile, so it's not being applied the same way that it was discovered, with the same excitement, with the same enthusiasm, with the same thirst for learning. So, in fact, teaching and learning are two different things. Okay, so learning is inner and teaching is outer. The goal of teaching is learning, but they're on two different levels, inner and outer. So you can have learning without teaching, and you can have teaching without learning. An inner game is saying that teaching interferes with learning. And so if we want to be agile about completing a task, we need to focus on the inner and remove the unnecessary steps, which are the teaching steps. Now, one of the advantages that the little boy has learning to walk, there's no judgment for a very simple reason. There's no consequence for failure, right? He's so low to the ground that falling is as much fun as getting up. So there's nothing to judge. There's no expectation. Now, realistically, we're all adults and everything can't be a surprise like I'm describing here. Agile already does exist. So what do we do? And this is where inner game comes in, because there's certain elements in this type of performance that emerge when we take an inner game approach. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce inner game itself. I'll then show you some of the principles involved so you could apply it yourself. And then we're going to, at the end, apply it to certain agile situations and see how inner game applies. Okay, so we can go to slide number 6. Okay. So inner game is a foundational set of coaching principles for attaining peak performance. And it was outlined in Tim Galloway's book back in the 70s. And basically what he did was introduce the world to the relationship between mindset and performance. To this day, every coaching school in the world starts out by teaching their students about inner game, because it's the foundation of all performance coaching, was what Tim Galloway discovered. And he's often referred to as the father of modern coaching. And I'm very lucky to have him be my friend and to have spent hundreds of hours with him over how to apply inner game to different things. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so inner game is a way to achieve peak performance. So let's define peak performance. A working definition could be performing beyond expectations. That means you can't expect to perform beyond expectations. By definition, you can't try to achieve peak performance. In fact, trying to achieve peak performance is the very thing that'll interfere. And that's why peak performance is so elusive, because people try to achieve it. If you're trying to sleep, are you sleeping? In fact, it's trying to get to sleep that's the very thing that'll continue to keep you up. If I'm trying to like someone, do I really like them if I have to try? If I'm trying to have fun, am I actually having any fun? No, not if I have to try. As it turns out, trying interferes with the performance itself. So if somebody's trying to learn Agile, it's going to interfere, and it will not be an Agile process to become an Agile practitioner. So we go to the next slide. Okay. There's three simple principles to achieving the inner game. Okay. And the first one is that you can't win the outer game without winning the inner game. So every activity has an outer game and it has an inner game. So the outer game would be completion of the task. The inner game would be how you did against your potential. How did you fulfill your potential in the process? Did you evolve a more agile mindset in the process? What did you learn? How did you feel? Those are inner outcomes. And if you go to the next slide, the second is that you must trust winning the inner game. You must trust that by winning the inner game, the outer game will take care of itself. So let me give you an example. Inner game was founded with tennis. So let's say I play a tennis match against Andy Murray, one of the best tennis players in the world, and I lose 6-0, 6-1. So I lost the outer game. He got a better score. Okay. But here I am, 70 years old, and I got a game off one of the world's best tennis players. I exceeded my expectations. I fulfilled my potential as a tennis player. I feel like a winner. So I won the inner game, even though I lost the outer game. And point two here, I have to trust that by winning the inner game, the outer game will take care of itself. So if I achieve my full potential as a tennis player and play beyond my expectations, I don't have to worry about the score. The score is going to take care of itself if I play up to my full potential. And point number three, if instead I focus on the outer game, try to get the best score, then it'll interfere with my performance because I'm neglecting the inner game, which is playing up to my potential. That's very simple. Now, all right, I've described inner game enough. Right now, what I'm going to do is actually show it to you. The problem with Agile, by the way, is that everyone's focused on the outer game, which is completion of the task and achieving the outcome, and overlooking the inner game, which is the potential we possess that allows us to achieve that outcome. See, at the beginning of Agile, when it was just being discovered, we were excited about its potential and discovering what Agile couldn't do. It was exceeding expectations. Now, everybody has expectations about Agile that need to be met. We're trying to recreate something that initially appeared as a surprise. What I'm posing to you is that perhaps the fact that it was a surprise is what made Agile Agile in the first place. And if it's an expectation rather than a surprise, the excitement diminishes. And we define a set of principles that need to be taught, but the magic of Agile is not in the principles. It's in discovering one's potential and capacity for finding solutions, which is inside of everybody, not the outside task. So I'm going to show you a video of Tim actually putting this in practice through a tennis lesson. Tim was very excited about inner game and he was really talking it up. And one television station gave him a challenge. He said, okay, we're going to give you a challenge. Let's see how good inner game really is. The desired outcome is for you to take a beginner and have her hitting forehands, backhands, and serves over the net and into the court on a regular basis. And we're going to give you a half hour to do it. Now, that if you're a tennis instructor, you know that's going to be more like 6 months to a year to get somebody hitting consistent forehands, backhands, and serves. Tim has a half an hour. So he's going to have to be really agile. And by the way, this isn't just any beginner. This is Molly. She's middle-aged. She never did anything athletic, wearing a muumuu, never picked up a tennis racket before, obviously. And so from what I talked about already, you can kind of tell what elements Tim is going to introduce to have this accelerated performance and what he's going to eliminate to reduce the interference to learning. So he's going to introduce learning and observation and awareness and excitement. What he's going to need to get rid of is teaching, instructions. Okay. This, believe it or not, is what interferes with performance and expectations, by the way, and self-judgment and self-doubt are all things that he's going to eliminate in order to turn a year's worth of tennis lessons into a half hour. Okay, now let's watch.
I'm going to have Tim hit some balls to me. And as the ball flies through the air, I want you just to watch it. In the very instant the ball hits the court, I want you to say bounce. And the very instant the ball hits the racket, I want you to say hit. So you just be saying bounce, hit. All you need to do is watch the ball. Okay? Bounce. The key of all the exercises in the inner game is to focus the mind's attention somewhere where it will not interfere with the body's ability to hit the ball automatically. You stand here and Tim will throw you a couple and you just continue doing the same thing. So try to hit it? Not at first. At first, just say bounce when the ball bounces and hit when you would hit it, but don't hit it. Then after you feel like hitting it, go ahead and hit it. Okay. Bounce, hit. Bounce, hit. Bounce, hit. Hit. Okay. When the player is first learning the game of tennis, and when he says bounce, he's also out of the corner of his eye watching me hit the ball. So even though he's not trying to see how I hit it, the image of me hitting it is going right into his memory. You enjoying yourself? Yeah, it's really fun. You like that? Okay, here we go. Love it. The cardinal principle in any book written on tennis, about tennis, is to watch the ball. No tennis player really sees the ball enough. And the reason is they get bored. So I try to give them something to see in the ball that's interesting. So we watch the trajectory of the ball, the gracefulness of the line made by the balls that fly through the air. How is it the same? Put the mind somewhere where it can stay calm and not get you uptight, but relaxed and interested. Then the body does so beautifully, so beautifully. You might start listening to the ball, Molly. Listen to how it sounds on your racket. Hear that? Yes. Hear that one? What did that sound like? Very dull. It was like wood. How wood sound. Keep listening, and you'll hear the sound that you like pretty soon. Just listen to it. Okay, now listen on this side. How'd it go? Not bad. Now feel where that racket is part of your arm. That's it. Just feel it. Don't try so hard. Let it happen. That's it. Do what's comfortable, Molly.
Every time I did start to think, things went wrong.
Okay.
When I just stopped thinking, the body seems to know what to do.
Can you feel with your left hand where it is? There you go. Since we're in the back there, feel it.
Okay. I think I'm on mute. Let's see.
No, you're good.
Hear you.
I'm good? Okay. Yes. So what I'm going to do is put what you just saw with this accelerated learning. I cut it short, so it was only 15 minutes, but he went on to show Molly the serve and got the whole thing done in a half hour. And by the way, from then on, Molly didn't need another tennis lesson ever again. Not only was it accelerated learning, but it was sustainable learning, just like learning to walk or riding a bicycle. Tim took that part of the brain by eliminating any kind of judgment, expectation, and increasing her observation of the ball and where it was bouncing. He actually created a type of learning that didn't go away. She didn't need another tennis lesson, and she was a tennis player ever since. Very sustainable. So I want to just go over what we just saw in terms of the classic learning model and contrast it with what Tim Gallwey brought to the field of learning. So this 4 stages here that you see in the slide is the classic motto, Abraham Maslow's 4 stages of learning, which is typically how we currently learn everything. And it's also the way tennis is typically taught. It's the way Agile's being taught. It starts with unconscious incompetence. So I saw this at a park one time where a guy was a really muscular, in shape guy, but he obviously never played tennis before. He just watched it on TV, and somebody hits him a ball, and he goes to take his first tennis shot, and instead of hitting the ball over the net, he hits it over the fence. Goes on somebody else's court. They get angry, and he was just shocked that the ball wasn't supposed to do that. It doesn't go like that on TV. And so he says, hit me another one. So he hits him another ball, and sure enough, he takes a big swing, and it goes over the fence and into a tree somewhere. And he says, how do they control it on TV? Well, he just graduated to stage 2. Now he knows that he doesn't know how to play tennis, that he can't control the ball. If he's serious about improving his tennis career, he'll go on to stage 3 and take a tennis lesson, which is conscious competence. Now, the instructor will say, this is how you hold the racket, and you take the racket back when the ball crosses the net, you drop your racket, then you step forward, you swing, you should be making contact at about waist high, then the ball, you finish, follow through, about 8 things to remember. And here comes the ball, and it's got to think about 8 things while the ball's coming to him. And it's not very natural, it's not really fun. You're thinking about all this very conscious competence. But if he continues to practice long and hard, he'll eventually graduate to the holy grail, the stage 4 of learning and performance, which is unconscious competence, where now he can hit forehands and backhands without having to think about how to hit the ball anymore. Okay, the 4 stages of learning. This is how most things are taught. Now, Tim Gallwey took a look at this and paraphrasing, he said, this isn't very agile. There's a couple really big steps that you could eliminate and streamline this whole process. And here's the problem. Right now in this classic model, your operating variable is competence. That's what you're looking for. There's 2 variables in this formula. There's the conscious unconscious, which is inner, and there's competence incompetence, which is outer. And the problem is that the focus is on the outer. The problem is that what we're looking for, the goal, is about the learner's competence. And Tim said, this is not agile. What you need to do is simply change your goal from the competence, which is the outer model, to the inner model, which is conscious unconscious. And when you do that, we can go to the next slide. You bypass steps 2 and 3. And this is what we just saw in the video, where Tim took Molly, who had unconscious incompetence, didn't know what she needed to know to play tennis. And he purposely kept her unconscious, not knowing what she's supposed to do. Just let's play bounce hit. And so she went directly to unconscious competence because he redefined from outer to inner, from competence to conscious. Isn't that amazing? So let me show you the actual inner game technology here, because it's really very simple. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, really 2 main elements that will allow you to do this for yourself. Okay, when you're with people in a group, or even you could do this with yourself. But the first thing was the redefinition from outer to inner. So we saw in the video with the tennis lesson that Tim redefined the activity from playing tennis to playing bounce hit. Okay, from outer, playing tennis, which is getting the ball over the net and into the court, to inner, which had to do with Molly's awareness of the ball in relation to the racket using the bounce hit game. And he did this by identifying 2 things: critical variables and distractors. So the critical variable, when I say critical, I don't mean judging, I mean critical like important. The critical variable is Molly's awareness of the ball in relation to the racket. It's critical for Molly to be able to play tennis to know where the ball is in relation to the racket. But Tim can't say to her, I want you to be aware of the ball in relation to the racket, because she would start judging herself. So he used a distractor, which is the bounce hit game, which created a state of awareness without any judgment and eliminating trying to play tennis. See, Isn't that simple? Everyone can do this. Would you like to see another example? I assume that's a yes. Okay,
Thumbs up from everyone.
thumbs up. Okay, great. Another example. Same principle applies here. Now, in this example, the father wanted to take a picture of his daughter for grandma. And so he says, okay, I'm going to take a picture for grandma, sweetie, smile. And so because dad told her to smile, she tries to smile. She wants to be compliant. But we could call this an external smile, an outer smile, because she's trying to smile. It was motivated from her father telling her it's time to smile now. And it's not really, the father said, you know, this isn't the kind of picture that I want to send to grandma. It's not very natural. And he knows that she laughs and smiles every time she watches the dog play tug of war. So he got the dog out and started playing, and the mom started playing tug of war with the dog. And while she was watching the dog, he takes this picture. Next slide. Same little girl. Okay. It's a more natural smile. It's a prettier smile. You could say it's a peak performance smile. Okay. And it's an inner smile because this time the smile came from her feeling of happiness, watching her dog have fun. Now, there's two important points. The first important point is, in this second picture with the prettier smile, the father never actually said anything about the little girl smiling at all. He didn't bring the subject of smiling up whatsoever. And the second point is that this is a prettier smile exactly because he didn't say anything about smiling. Because if he said, that's a pretty smile, hold it just like that, we would have gone back to the external smile again. Okay. So if we go to the next slide, which is, I think is number 13, which is a duplicate of the previous slide. Slide after that. Yes. Okay. Two main elements of inner game. Once again, this is exactly the same slide that I showed you after watching the tennis lesson. There's a redefinition from outer to inner. Okay. So what was the redefinition this time? Well, smiling is outer and happiness is inner. And the father realized, what I'm not looking for is a smile, which is outer. What I'm looking for is her expression of happiness, which is inner. And by the way, when I was explaining inner game, point number 2, which was you have to trust that if you focus on the inner game, the outer game will take care of itself. Okay, that applies here. It applies everywhere. The father had to trust that if the little girl was happy, the expression on her face would be sufficient. Okay, that's an application of point number 2. Now, what was the critical variable? What was the distractor here? The critical variable was the little girl getting in touch with her happiness. But once again, he couldn't say, I want you to be happy. You need to be happy now. So he used the distractor. And the distractor was the dog playing. creating awareness without judgment, and he eliminating her trying to smile. Now, if we go to slide number 16, okay. No, that you had the right one before. Yes. Okay. Agile leadership. How would you implement agile leadership in an agile way? And this is what Inner Game brings to agile. Very simple. What can you put your team's focus on that would be the equivalent of having the little girl focus on her dog? And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was exactly the point where I got my aha moment, was that very question, to say, how can you reframe things for your teams in order to get them to do things at peak performance? Thank you, Jeff. That was really inspiring. So just before we move on to the next bit, I just wanted to sort of share that I met Jeff when he was talking about the Inner Game at the Agile Business Consortium. He did actually add a part onto that about the Inner Game of sales, where he introduced the idea of a salesman selling to a customer. And I think many of us already know that the idea of customer centricity, the best way to sell is to understand your customers. So I think that's one of the key things that kind of really made me go deeper into the into the Inner Game, because I really felt that it has a lot of agility around it. Anyway, less babbling. I'm going to pass it over
I could
to
say
Alistair.
one thing I could add though, is when you're wanting to be agile as a salesperson, what can you cut out? What is the extra steps that are typically involved in selling that you really don't need? Turns out those extra steps are selling. Because if you look at the redefinition of selling from outer to inner, selling is outer and buying is inner. It's decision making. It happens between the customer's ears.
Mhm.
So if the goal of selling is buying, that's what you're not being paid to sell. You're not paid for giving 50 different selling points instead of 20 different selling points. Nobody cares. You're paid for how many customers buy as a result of those selling points. Cut out the selling and just focus on your customer's decision process. And you're a much more agile salesperson. Okay.
Thank you, Jeff. That's also very inspirational. Over to Alistair, who again is also a big fan of the Agile, the Inner Game. And one thing that we're also doing is exploring where we can take this a little bit further than today. Alistair is going to take you through an exercise where we start to apply the Inner Game to agility. Alistair, over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Jeff, for that again. Although we've been talking about this now for over a year, you and I, meeting sort of not quite weekly, but almost weekly, I still watch what you've just produced and what you've presented to us. And I'm still furiously writing notes. I think I'm on page number 5 now with my notes, because it just takes that time for this to embed as we peel away the layers of what has been built up around us through our education system, as we've gone and got careers and we've got qualifications and so on. All those layers dampen us down, and we need to free ourselves up from that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, can I say one thing about that? Actually, I have a little anecdote here.
Please do.
Is that so Inner Game has been around for a long time, and the book Inner Game of Tennis is its 50th anniversary edition is coming out. It's been that many decades now. And so here in the United States, we have the Tennis Channel, which is 24 hours of tennis on the television every single day. I love it. And in spite of the fact that every year, The Inner Game of Tennis is the best-selling tennis book, and it's been 50 years. And now in 2023, once again, it's the best-selling tennis book. You would think that the Tennis Channel would be mentioning something about Timothy Gallwey, and they never did. And they never mentioned Inner Game. And a couple of years ago, Tim finally got in touch with them and said, hey, look, I like brought so many people to the game, and my book is still a bestseller. Do you want to say anything about Inner Game on the Tennis Channel? And their response to him was very telling, very revealing. They said, well, it's been a long time, and we no longer consider you to be a threat anymore. So sure, we'll do a program about Inner Game. And Tim and I knew exactly what they were talking about, feeling that Inner Game was a threat, because you have this whole tennis teaching institution, and you have a self-certification program where you need to learn all the instructions to teach somebody tennis. And here comes Tim Gallwey saying, well, actually teaching interferes with learning. You don't need to be taught it at all. And the more you need your tennis teacher, the worse the job they're doing. The best tennis teachers are the ones that make you think you don't need them. Well, that was a threat to the whole institution of tennis teaching, and they actually avoided talking about Inner Game for decades.
I think that's thank you for reminding me of that story, because that is exactly how I think it feels for a lot of us working in the agile world right now. Is that it is threatening to suggest that there is a straight path from being a human and being agile that doesn't have to go through all of the expensive and time-consuming learning and so on, and it just it comes there, which is why I think what we're doing here and what we will hopefully continue to do as we think about how we can sort of deploy this will be very interesting. And if there's anybody on the call who's like Sheetal, when we did this for the Agile Business Consortium, Sheetal immediately got in touch and said, hey, this is amazing, let's do more, we need to talk more. So Sheetal joined our little group, and we have been sort of sharing these ideas and exploring them and exploring how they work for Agile. So if anybody wants to help us with that, that would be amazing. What I want to do now,
what I want to say is, but everybody, if you really see the value of Inner Game and want to move it forward in your group, prepare to have to confront the Agile establishment in the process. You're going to get some resistance, because we are there's a lot of people making a lot of money teaching Agile.
Yeah.
And they're not going to want to hear that there's a more natural way to learn.
Yeah, I actually agree with that one. And I think the one thing that stood out during your talk, Jeff, was the idea that when we're doing Agile, we're going through those. It's almost like we think about the outputs all the time. It's all outcomes and outputs focused. Sorry, outcomes focused is the actual word on the street, so to speak. But actually what you're saying is you're trumping that theory in the Agile world. And what you're actually saying is what's in the middle here is what really matters. What goes on inside of our minds is what we need to consider in more detail than actually what happens, and let the outcome take care of itself. And I really think that it's a great analogy, and I think that's another aha point that came to mind for me.
Yes, see, you are a project that's doing a project.
Exactly.
So in the course of doing the project, you have the inner project, which is your agile mindset evolving during the course of getting the external outcome done to please the stakeholder.
That's exactly right. And if we believe that human beings have an infinite capacity for problem solving and innovation when we work together and we collaborate, then what we're looking to do is to remove anything that interferes with that collaboration, with that thinking, with that inner work that goes on. And I think that, you know, if we are, as you have mentioned already, if we're worried about things, if we're concerned about things, if we're a fear of being judged, fear of, you know, in unintended consequences and so on, then of course we are not we're not fulfilling our potential, which is one of the phrases that you used earlier. So that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Well, it
before-
interferes with observation. It's observation, learning, performance. So those kinds of self-judgments are going to be distracting.
Exactly.
So our observation is compromised, which impedes our learning, which ultimately affects our performance.
So we can do one of two things, Sheetal, right now, is we can either go and look at those 3 scenarios that we've created that have evolved for this, or we can go to questions. And I don't know whether the audience, whether you guys who have joined and taken the time and are still with us would like to ask some questions, or whether you'd like to work with us and jump in to 1 or 2 or maybe all 3 scenarios and look at how what Jeff has been showing us today, how that gets applied to an agile scenario. So those that would be in favor, if you can check, Sheetal, those that would be in favor of questions rather than going to the scenarios, put your hand up now, virtually or otherwise. And those that you would like to see us doing some examples and running through how this might work for agile in real life. Get your hands now. Would we say that there's an outstanding desire to look at those? Right then, so we shall do that. So what I'm going to do, then is I'm going to show you a scenario. So this is these are scenarios borrowed from agile people who've do some great work in helping us to learn and to practice our agility in great ways. So what we have here is we have a scenario, and what I'd like to do is, if a couple of you, one of you could be the actor and one of you will be the learner. So I'd like you, and normally what agile people do is they put everybody into separate rooms with 3 people, and there's an observer and so on. But in order for us to really get the most out of this, if there are a couple of people who will be willing to do this, if you could do this live for us, remember, you're not trying to get it right, you're not trying to be perfect, you're not trying to succeed. What you're doing is helping us all learn together. So if you'd like to do that, that would be fantastic. And what I will do is I'll read out the scenario, and then we could, if there's a couple of volunteers, make yourself known to Sheetal, and we could play the game. What we're then going to do after we've looked at your scenario and how you reacted to that, what we're going to do is ask Jeff to coach us as an observation coach as to how we might want to do that differently. And these scenarios and the perfect, and I put that in inverted commas, the perfect answers will be made available with the slides after the show. So what we have here is a coding team was recently told that some of the code needs to be in a language none of the members really know. They need to learn it as quickly as possible, and they've been given a manual to read. But no one seems to be learning it. In spite of the poor grades on the tests, no one in the group is even asking questions to gain understanding. James, the line manager, Shahana, the product owner, and Tiago, the scrum master, are discussing what they can do to improve the situation. Okay, and so what we'd like to do is, if somebody would like to be either James or Shahana, pick one each, and we will try and play this game. And what we'll do is you can use one of the 3 scenarios, starting points that you have in there, to start the conversation. Okay.
Okay, who'd like to be James then? Hands up.
So just play with us here, and it's for learning.
I have my eye on somebody, but let's give you a few seconds to come forward.
I can be James.
Okay.
Thank you, Ines.
Thanks, Ines.
And if we could have somebody who will be, let's go with Shahana or Tiago. Who would like to be that?
Hi, Alistair. I'll take, who is it? Shahana?
You'll take Charlotte? Fantastic. Thank you, Ish. Okie dokie. So if I hand it over to you, Ines, and so Ines, you start and pick a scenario. And what you're doing is you're having a conversation about how you're going to solve this problem that we have, which is that people are not learning the new language. Okay, because the book that the manual they're reading doesn't make any sense to them, but they're not saying anything about it. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, if
so
they said something about it, they would sound stupid to the others. So
is the idea to pick one of the options?
Yeah, do whatever you want with it, Ines. If you want to pick an option, great. If you've got something better in your head, then go with that. But you're having a conversation with Ish about how to solve this problem that we have. We've got a new language to learn in order for us to deliver this product.
Probably my first question would be, if we ask them how they would like to learn this language.
So Ish, what are your thoughts on that?
James, what ideas could they be? Could they be like webinars, books? What do you think, James?
I think I still would like to hear from them before I would give them my own ideas on where their head's at.
Good thinking, James. My target as a PO is to get everybody at the right level, right grade of understanding of the new coding language. What about Tiago? Tiago, what do you think, mate? Do we have a Tiago?
I can be Tiago.
Perfect. Tiago, what do you think?
Okay, so Tiago is going to say, well, you know what, time, and we have a really pressured backlog at the moment, so our team may not have the time to learn this new language. I mean, how are we going to allocate time for this?
Tiago, that's
Okay.
a great point. We do have a busy backlog. How about if I, as a PO, take out a few stories this sprint? Would that help? And then we can train them or whatever we're going to do with them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly up for James's comment, James's point on the idea that we do need to think about what does team think. Are they open to learning this language? Do they know where to start? Has anyone an idea? And how long is it going to take to learn such a language as well?
Okay, so if we were going to take an intergame approach, we have to redefine the task from outer to inner and find a critical variable and a distractor. The critical variable is the point that they need to focus on, and the distractor is going to eliminate judgment and expectations. Now, I think we could all agree, you know, one of the things that would be interfering is that they're expected to learn a new language in a very short period of time. And so they're judging themselves. And it's interfering, one of the things it's interfering with is their ability to ask questions. Because if they ask a question, they're revealing that they don't know something, and it makes them look stupid in front of the rest of the group. So nobody's asking questions, and people aren't learning. Okay, so what we want is learning. The teaching is a step that's unnecessary. Okay, we could, you know, teach them, get them on the same level, but we don't really care about the teaching. Okay, we care about the learning. That's what we want. So okay, so, and that's inner. So how can we focus on learning in a way that they don't feel judged anymore and they don't feel pressure? Okay, now Inez said something, which is ask them how they want to learn. Okay, and that's because that's coming from within. Okay, now you're asking them. So you could ask them, like, well, what are you doing? What? And so if I was one of them, I would say, well, I'm trying to learn, but it's very difficult. Okay.
if I was one of them, I would say I'm trying to learn, but it's really difficult because this manual has been written in such a way that it doesn't make sense to us. We
Mhm.
are finding ourselves unable to comprehend
Mhm.
the manual. It's not only is it teaching us a new coding language, it seems to have been written in a language that we're not familiar with.
Ah, okay. So we want observation, which leads to learning, which needs performance. The trying to learn is interfering with the observation. So we want to improve the observation by eliminating trying to learn. Okay. And does anybody have a way, because we have a way, of course, but let's see if anybody wants to guess or try to figure out a way that we can get them to observe the material in a way that they won't be judging themselves for not learning it. Anybody want to guess?
Jeff, Jeff, before I guess, is your
Yes.
question, is there a way that we
Mhm.
want them to observe the material, the
Mhm.
manual? Is that
The
okay?
manual.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, the manual.
Sean,
Okay.
you came off mute. Have you got something for us?
I was going to suggest something kind of off script.
Good.
So this
Yeah,
isn't about understanding the manual. I thought, could we possibly give them a small bit of working code in this new language and have them try and discover how it works? So kind of leave it
Mhm.
with them as a you know as a little plaything. So there's no immediate demand for a delivery or anything like that, but
Mhm.
you have something to experiment with. And then
Mhm.
later on, we get to the stage where,
Mhm.
they can actually produce stuff.
Mhm.
It's just an idea.
If I may, I was
Yeah,
going
that would work, if they know that it's just practice, if it's just like, sandboxing and
Yeah, like a
you
hackathon
know,
or something.
yeah, that could work. I don't know if they'd be able to get through the entire manual in the time that they need to. Although, so there might be that might take up a lot of time, but that's an option.
And you're certainly
Um,
thinking along the right lines there, Sean. Ines, you had
yeah,
something.
Sorry, yeah, I was gonna very along the lines what Sean said. I was gonna probably ask them, when was the time that you've learned a new language that you had the most fun? And make them remind themselves what they've done, and could you apply that now?
oh, that's a really good one. And this reminds me of an anecdote. And it really makes it a point to intergame, which is that if a family has to relocate to another country, like one of the parents gets a new job and has to transfer to a country where the family doesn't speak that language, invariably the children always learn the new language first. Isn't that interesting? Because they don't have to, because they're not judging themselves.
That's it. I
I
think
mean,
that's
you see intergame happen all the time. So what would be a way that we could duplicate that mindset? See, it's about the mindset that would accelerate the learning here. And I'll tell you what we did.
Shall I show
We
the
said to
slide?
them,
Shall I show the slide? No, you say
yeah,
it first, and then we'll show the
yes,
slide. You say it first, and we'll show the slide.
okay. What we did is we said, you're here to improve our manuals. You don't need to worry about the code. What's happening is that we have these manuals that are not really understandable because the manual writer is just learning how to explain what he knows. So he's not very good at articulating. And what we want you to do is go through the manual. This actually happened, is go through the manual and just write down the points that are not very understandable. So next to each concept, you just write down understand, don't understand. Right? Because we know that you don't understand what the manual's talking about, but you do understand when you don't understand. So write that down. And they went through the manual and began asking questions and got all the information that they needed and learned it at a much faster pace and got a lot more grades.
And what's beautiful about this is based on a real life example that Tim Galway used when he was coaching and doing some work with AT&T. And it's in his book, The Inner Game of Work. And so this is just a perfect example of where you're giving the people that you want to learn something other than, because we know what it's like as a chartered accountant myself. You give me a new thing to learn around the world of chartered accountancy, and I'm going to be fearful that I get it right because I'm supposed to get it right. Now, if you can distract me and do something else with my brain whilst I'm looking at the numbers, my brain will work out the numbers. And this is the example that we have here of that. Has anybody got any thoughts on that? And by the way, thank you, Sean, Ines, and Ish for helping us with this one, and for helping us get to where we got to. But any thoughts?
And Ines too. And yes, yes. Okay.
I've got a question actually. So the critical variable for the inner game of tennis was the bounce hit scenario. Is that correct?
No, that was the distractor.
Okay.
The critical variable was Molly's awareness of the ball in relation to the racket.
Okay.
You can't say to Molly, I want you to be aware of where the ball is in relation to the racket, because then she would try.
I see.
So Tim needed a distractor, which was the bounce hit game.
That's it. So in this case, a distractor is just to kind of go through the manual, look for things that you understand versus things you don't understand.
Well, the distractor is that the manual was not written well. Okay. Of course you don't understand it. It's a bad manual. There's nothing wrong with you. Okay. But we're trying to train this manual writer, and we'd like your help with this. Okay, that's the distractor to get rid of the judgment.
Yeah, and that takes away any expectations of learning it, but you're actually learning it naturally because you're
right. Because the critical variable is knowing what you don't understand.
In the same way as when Molly observed Tim playing tennis at the beginning of that video, she just saw tennis being played, and her entire being, her entire neurology was basically learning what she herself needed to do when she was standing at the end of the court. And I think again, coming back to that point I made earlier, we have an infinite capacity for doing these things and for solving these problems. So if we are looking at the manual and trying to learn a new code language, we are going to be stressed out because we are coders and we have to learn something in order to perform. But by being provided by our coaches or by our stakeholders or by our leaders, being provided with a distractor, which is forget about the code, tell us what's wrong with this manual. What is happening is our subconscious minds will learn everything that's in that manual without us even knowing that we're doing it. And that's the beauty of what we can bring to Agile and to Agile projects is the fact that when we can take the stress away from our teams and from ourselves by learning how to identify critical variables and learning how to provide them with distractors, then they will deliver peak performance, which, as we know, is delivering beyond expectations. And this is
Inner
where,
game. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no,
This
that's
is
fine.
where,
That's
oh,
fine.
I was going to say inner game redefines agile leadership,
Exactly right.
what
Ines,
agile
you've got your
leadership
hand up.
really is.
Ines, what?
Yeah, I probably have a question that is not a question. It's probably kind of like it's gonna trigger. It's probably impossible to answer. I don't know, but how do we train the muscle of being able to have and apply these mindsets? Probably too big of a question.
Now, how do you train the muscle? Well, attending inner game, you're coming to more meetups, and reading Tim's books, and just understanding there's a more agile way to do things. I mean, how did you evolve the agile mindset that you have now? There was a thirst to be able to evolve and see things in a way that you feel is better than it was before. And something is keeping you motivated to continue to come to these workshops and continue to learn more about Agile all the time. You know, there's that natural thirst that we all have to learn and improve and evolve. And it's exciting, just like the child wanting the natural instinct to want to walk. Did I answer your question?
So, for example, Ines, when I first read The Inner Game of Tennis, which was about in the 1990s, the first thing I did, having read the book, and having understood it intellectually and academically, I went out onto a tennis court and I basically tried to visualize and try to experience, I tried to get my body to experience what Tim was talking about. And so I spent about 2 or 3 hours knocking the ball against the wall and serving and doing all those things without anybody there, without any judgment, without any interference, right? And what I found was I could teach my body how to respond to the ball coming at me or to the ball flying in the air and so on. And what I realized only many, many years later was that I'd actually been using that approach, that confidence that I got from knowing that my subconscious mind and my neurology knows how to figure stuff out, gave me the confidence to just relax into it and just go, hey, brain, you know how to do this stuff. You know, when you're ready, when you figure this out, give me the answer. Tell me how it goes. And having learned that later, in many years later, I read a book by David Rock called Your Brain at Work. And in there, again, he talks about the subconscious mind and how without being, if it's not interfered with by worry, fear, judgment, etc., you can actually give it a task and it will figure out the way of doing things. We won't have time to go through the other scenarios, but in here we have a scenario where you're dealing with a leader who is basically coming and wanting to throw their weight around a little bit. So how do you do that, and so on? And what we want to do over the course of time is bring all these examples to the fore so that we can help us all free our brains from doing that. But primarily, Ines, I think the answer to your question is you need to experience it, and that will give you the confidence to know that it works. And that's what we would do through coaching to start with. So we would coach a team and help them and say, right, let's do these things. You know, the equivalent of what Tim did with Molly. That's what we will do. And once you've figured it out, guess what? You don't need us anymore. It's the shortest gig on the planet. Because once Jeff has shown you how to do this in your own way, we're out of there. And we're going to move on to the next thing. It's not like your traditional consulting coaching, where what you're doing is you're clawing your fingers onto the table and stuffing your feet as far under the desk as you can and staying there as long as possible, because we don't need to do that, because your brain knows how to figure stuff out.
We're
Your
introducing you
team's
to you.
brain know how to figure stuff out. So we want to just release that potential as Alkesh has been saying in the posts, performance is potential minus interference.
Mhm.
Your ability to perform is how much can we reduce that interference? And that's what we're talking about here. Sorry, Sean, you've had your hand up for a while.
No, that's fine. Well, one thing I just wanted to say, I really believe in what you guys are describing here. Yeah, it's very much the internal obstacles, I think, that you're trying to get rid of. I was just thinking that the way that agile coaches or practitioners and experts and whatever have tried to do this in the past is to get rid of the blame culture in the organization. I just wanted to know where you felt that fitted in what you're talking about here. Because if you remove the blame culture, then I guess there's less of of a need for the distractor. Where to take them away from feeling shame from not being able to do something that they think they should be able to do. So just where does
Yeah.
that fit in the equation? Just wanted to.
Yeah, well, the most insidious blame culture is inside of our own heads. Okay. We can tell somebody to shut up, or we can leave the room of somebody who's blaming us and just slam the door in their face. And, that's easy to fix it on the outside. Much more difficult to fix the blame culture that's going on the inside that maybe has our dad's voice or our mom's voice to it.
Or our education system.
Then the education system, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So it has your teacher's voice assigned to that blame. Okay, that's the most insidious, that's the biggest source of interference to our learning and our willing to explore and discover ourselves and our ability as agile performers. And that's really where we need to prioritize our intervention.
I think that just to add to that, Sean, one thing that I've done in the past around blame culture is shifting how we think about us working as a team. So the focus is on the work and not who's doing what. It could be one way of looking at the inner side of it than the outer. It's just kind of focus. Do correct me, Jeffrey, because I'm still learning about the inner game here as well. But it's about thinking in a different way. So we don't think about the person and what they're doing and how it's impacting, but it's almost like how is that kind of leading us to the outcomes we're looking for as well. So I still have the agile mindset, so that whole outcomes focus is still pretty much is embedded in my brain right now.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Well, there's two outcomes. There's an inner outcome and there's an outer outcome. And which one is more important? They're both important. The outer outcome, pleasing the stakeholder, it's very important, but also the inner outcome in terms of your evolution as an actual agile practitioner, because it's that mindset that you need in order to please the stakeholder. That's why the stakeholder has picked your team, is because they feel that you're going to have the mindset that it takes in order to complete the task the way they want it to.
And I was going to say, and what took me a while to really grasp on this point, Sean, was that, and I think this applies to Inez's question earlier as well, is we know that we can't, in all consciousness, go into a project and say, I don't care about the results, the outcome, about delivering the stuff. Don't care about that. I'm all about me, and I'm all about how I'm going to do it, right? So I totally get that. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. We're not talking about we ignore that, right? And this is many debates that we've been having about this. But what I really got to understand, and it was in the introduction that Jeff gave us in the first part of this video, of this session, which is that by focusing on the inner outcome, that gives us the best possible outer outcome. That's the key, because what happens is if we stay focused on the outer outcome, then stress, worries, lack of psychological safety, and all the other things that crowd our brains and impair our performance come into play. And so that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to say it's the inner that needs to be worked on. And to answer Inez's question again, is once you've experienced that once or twice with the help of a coach or with the help of or applying it to things that don't matter in the world of work, you then have the confidence to allow that to happen. So back to you, Inez.
Yeah, no, I wrote something before that the way I've learned from you guys today is actually because we care about the outer outcome, because as you said, we live in the real world. In the real world, our the people we work for, they don't really care about this chat, okay? They care about the outer outcomes, but it's exactly because you care about the outer outcomes that you focus on the inner side.
Correct.
Because
100%.
that's what can deliver the better outer outcome.
Exactly.
But if you focus on the outer outcome, you're not going to get the best one.
Exactly right. And it's the same thing.
Without
Go on,
the
go on.
outer outcome, you can't develop the inner outcome, which is the mindset. I mean, you know, if I was going to have a competition here between my two hands, okay, and I say, decide, oh, I'm going to be a pacifist, and I don't like competition, and I just, you know, I don't like constraints. Well, nothing got stronger. If I have a constraint where the other hand is pushing against that hand, okay, now I'm actually gaining strength, which is inner. So the resistance of my hand is outer. It's a constraint. It's a desired outcome that we need. But the inner part is because of the force applied, I'm making myself stronger in the process. And that wouldn't happen if I just cared about myself and not the constraint.
And we were talking about this earlier in the example of tennis. If you didn't have court markings and if you didn't have a net, there would be no point, because there would never be anything to overcome.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same. And this is where I love what Jeff says, is that we are a project working on a project. And
That's actually Tim.
Was
Tim
it Tim?
Galloway.
Tim said that.
Yeah, it's Tim.
Well, you told me, so you're my coach.
Yeah.
so
Yeah, he told me.
And I think, and it's the same with our projects. If we have valid constraints, not invalid, but if we have a valid constraint, like this is the deadline by which something needs to happen, and maybe this is the total amount of money we have to spend on this, two valid constraints in the modern world, well, in any world, but two valid constraints that we have, then allow ourselves to work out how to deliver within those. If you add the third constraint and create an iron triangle, then I'm sorry for you. But if you know that what you're trying to do is deliver an outcome by whatever means within these constraints, then that's where we grow, and that's where we develop, and that's where our inner becomes stronger and stronger. And then as we get stronger, we are delivering the outer outcomes ever faster, ever better, ever more fluidly, ever cheaper, ever everything else.
Exactly.
Optimally.
Rosangela
from Santiago, Chile.
You've been very patient.
I just want to add something that I think it's key as well. I've learned as well from Jeff and Tim. It's about the enjoyment, right? The component of enjoyment, which is, I guess, not considered in the traditional way of working. And it's really, really, really key to, and in this example, how this developers can learn in a way that they enjoy doing, right? And maybe on Inez question. If you consider when we ask something to someone, if you're not only looking at what we want, but how this person can enjoy doing what I'm asking them to do, and if they are adequate to do that I am asking, if they have everything they need to perform on what I'm asking them.
Yeah, look how much fun Molly was having. To Alistair's point, she wouldn't have had that much fun if there wasn't a net and there wasn't a court. That, you know, if it was just open space, it wouldn't have been much fun. So the constraints become part of the fun.
But I think what you're referring to there, Rosangela, is absolutely critical as well. I mean, it's something that Jeff has been teaching me, and something that we see in Tim's books as well, which is that one of the elements of performance, as you well know, is enjoyment. Some of us, myself included, got into the world of work in the late 1980s, early 1990s, when it was not about fun. You don't go to work to have fun. You go to work to do your job and to do what your boss tells you, and that's it. And unfortunately, that sentiment still pervades for many people in many areas. Now, there are many organizations that are doing absolutely brilliant work of helping their teams, their people, their humans to move beyond that, and actually realizing, of course, that when you're having the most fun is when you're learning the most and when you're delivering your best. The thing is that those folks that I'm thinking about from the 1990s and before, we have this fear that if you're enjoying yourself, you can't be doing your work, because you associate work with displeasure, with I have to do it, I need a paycheck kind of thing. So, but you're absolutely right. And the more we can help people understand that, then the better for everyone.
I think this ties in really nicely with the actual name of Tim's book, which is the Inner Game. Game. And actually, one of the reasons why it resonates in the Agile world so much, I feel, is that a lot of thinking, tools, practices are presented in the format of a game, so that it does land, it does get communicated across, and then people can embrace Agile ways of working, which is one of the other reasons why I thought, you know, this would be, it's a perfect fit in some ways, in many ways, even.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Listen, I think are we running out of time, or how are we doing for time, Sheetal? I
think we're okay. Usually we do kind of wrap up around 8 o'clock. But does anybody else have any thoughts or anything else that they want to share? I mean, if anyone's okay for time, I'm okay for time.
I have so many thoughts right now, but I'm thinking about all the things I want to do with my team right now, like asking each developer to take whatever thing from the backlog they want every sprint and work on that, and then assess, like analyze between the work that was asked them to do, how they performed versus the work that they've chosen to do, and take that as like a way of measuring the success of a different approach to work to my boss, and show like, see, but obviously I don't even know what's going to be the results, but I have lots of thoughts in my mind right now, things to do.
But I think on that note as well, we are going to be expanding on this area a lot. And we are going to be looking into how we can actually apply in a game into agility and Agile ways of working. So yeah, I mean, do watch this space, because there will be more to come on this topic. I think it's something that I'm very keen to grow it in our community here as well, and, you know, share that awareness around it, because I think it is something that is pretty much innate in most of us. It does exist. It's just a matter of putting it out there and being okay with, like, not judging ourselves, having no expectations on the outcomes, and actually really realizing our own potential. And I think this is what the Inner Game does.
And Inez, if you want to reach out to, to myself or Jeff, please do that, because,
Yeah.
we can then actually talk through some of those scenarios with you. And that's what we want to do, because in exchange, we will collect more scenarios and more examples of these things. But what we can do is give you the confidence of try it like this, or give it a go like this, because Jeff will tell me off for saying try. Give it a go in this space, because we know that would work. So please get in touch. Rosangela, you had another question, another point.
Do you have our contact information, by the way, so
on
you
the
can get in
system
touch
now.
with us if you want?
I will share it. So if anybody
Okay.
wants to
Yeah.
your details, then please reach out to me. You can always message me through the Meetup app, or even contact me on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to connect you in.
Rosangela, you had another one.
Yeah, just have a comment on when Jeff was telling us the story about the television program that was feeling inner game as a threatening to them, and maybe I'm gonna ask Jeff if he thinks it's really a threat. But before he answers, I want to mention something from my personal experience. As a teacher, I believe that even us as teachers that knows the technical points of it, of something, anything, could be anything, or even in the agile methodology, you know, all the strategies to complete the project in an agile way. Knowing that it's not, from my perspective, it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, because even if we are using the inner game, we know ahead of others on the key points. So the critical variables for knowing the critical variables, and if you know the technique, you can come up with the critical variables. You know, the ones that you can see ahead, and you can use your knowledge in favor of helping others to provide the challenge for others. Instead of telling them what to do, you are creating the scenarios, the challenge based on your knowledge. So you put them in, you speed up their learning through your knowledge, but you're not telling them. What.
Yeah.
Do you agree, Jeff?
Oh yeah, it's about accelerating the learning process and putting them in a position where they could learn rather than be taught. Yeah.
We have a question from Michael in the in the chat window about ChatGPT. His question is, hi all, how does conversational AI such as ChatGPT impact the inner game approach?
Right now, I would say that I have absolutely no idea, because it didn't even cross my mind that we would explore AI and those things for something like this, because we're talking about the human brain and its capacity to do things which no computer system can do. But I'll tell you what, Michael, we no doubt we'll go away and have a think about that one and come back, unless Jeff's got a thought. But for me personally, that's going to keep me awake tonight, maybe a little bit.
Well, I mean, eventually, I imagine if inner game gets adopted by more people, there's going to be a database of experiences where people would be talking about critical variables that they devised based on particular tasks, like, we just talked about learning a manual, and, maybe someday this story could make it into AI, or AI would be able to access, somebody could ask, what would be the best intergame approach for somebody to learn a new programming code? And AI might be able to give the answer. Perhaps you could create non-judgmental awareness by changing from outer to inner, making it more about the manual quality than the person's learning it or not. Who knows? But I mean, I would like to have a database of critical variables. And I think as, Alistair and I and other people begin to apply these intergame principles to agile leadership, we're going to come up with a whole range of different critical variables that relate to different agile scenarios and challenges that we come up with. And we want to be able to have like a central repository, whether it's going to be through AI or just a something on a website that we could have in a community board or something where people are constantly coming up with new critical variables for different learning challenges that we encounter in Agile.
Thanks. Ish, you had your hand up.
Sheetal, I had a story in my mind, and then I thought maybe I shouldn't tell it. It's about my son because this is being recorded, but screw it, let's tell it anyway. He's only small. He's only small. He doesn't know what inner game is at all. But this afternoon after school, my son is sort of, he's 6 years old. He's doing fine, kind of like in his mental state, but his physical sort of stuff isn't great, right? So like his painting skills aren't great. But I wasn't too fussed about that. I was fussed about his catching a ball skill, because I saw him play with his friends and he couldn't catch a ball. Oh, I thought, what kind of son are you? Right? Not my son if you can't catch a ball. So I thought, I'll teach you how to catch a ball. And this afternoon, he stood near me and I threw him the ball and I said, catch it, just to see what was happening. And he couldn't catch it. And then I started speaking about, then I started being a normal tennis coach, the threatened tennis coach. And I said to him, catch it near your chest height, your arms at this angle, your head's at this sort of degree, etc., right? And he was all over the place because he was spending time thinking about the 8 points of tennis or whatever I said. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if this is inner game or where my distraction is or where the sort of principles of inner games are. But we ended up at one stage, where his back was against the wall and he was able to catch the ball, and he was doing it even if he missed the ball because it went over his head, he was able to catch it against the wall on his shoulder, which is still a positive learning, positive moment for him, right? And then what happened was, okay, so he's caught the ball, and then he stood on one of these IKEA chairs, the little kiddie stool, small chairs you get. Can I turn my camera around? Oh, I can. That one there. Can you see that one there?
Yep.
Oh yeah,
Right.
the little one.
So, yeah. Okay. So every parent who's got a kid, if you've got a kid, you've got a parent, right? Has got one of the chairs. So he ended up himself standing on top of the chair, and he was catching the ball, sometimes straight to his hands, sometimes over the shoulder against the wall. And I thought to myself, so my sort of teaching and actual teaching, not learning through experience, was I need your arm to be at 45 degrees and your head to be at 24 degrees. Just didn't do anything at all. It was him actually being able to catch the ball himself over repetitiveness. And he was able to throw the ball as well. And his throwing wasn't great at the start, but he learned really well. And did I teach him how to throw a ball? I'm not sure if I taught him how to throw a ball, but I sort of said, I remember saying to him, just flow with the ball, the way the parabola, I didn't use the word parabola, right? But the angle the ball's going to leave your body and your arm, that's the angle that your arm is at, if that makes sense. And I was linking back from what Jeff's, the video that you guys showed about bounce, hit. And I thought maybe tomorrow I will try throw, catch, and see if we get any further. But I think this is being recorded, so I'll have to watch it back again, this lecture, this conversation, to see where my critical decisions are and my distractions are. Maybe a distraction might be putting on some music that he likes in the background. Just a thought.
I have a,
But
I have
so
a suggestion.
Or you could switch to sweets.
there's too many of them already. I caught him with a whole pack of cola bottles. Not one, a whole pack. Sorry, Jeffrey.
Yeah, sorry, Jeffrey.
Here's a suggestion. We observe by learning, and we perform by learning, and we learn by observing. So as we become better observers, we become better learners. As we become better learners, we become better performers. Okay? Why not? Don't make it about catching. Is it a tennis ball? If it's a tennis ball,
Let's call it a tennis ball. Yeah.
okay. If it's a tennis ball, have him watch the seams of the ball when they're coming to him and just describe to you, are they rolling quickly? Are there between 1 and 5, how quickly are the seams rolling? And just have him focus on the observation without trying to catch.
Mm.
The more focused he is on the seams and on the ball, the more subliminally he's going to be in touch with the ball in relation to his hand.
Yeah. Great point, Jeff. I did say to him the same point, which was, come on, son, focus on the ball. I thought that might be enough, but let's focus on seams.
Yeah, look at the seam, make it a little more concrete, a little more empirical. And so there's nothing to judge, and there's nothing for him to try to do.
Perfect. Next week, can I deal with my eldest son instead? Is that okay?
And please let us know how you get Nish, because
just one son per call.
And let us know how you get on, because this is exactly where it all works out, and having that experience will then help both you and him with an approach to all learning.
Yeah, I will do. Thanks, Alistair.
What I heard there as well, Ish, just to wrap up on this bit, was when he was leaning against the wall and against the wall and he was catching the ball beside him, neurologically, it felt when he came away from that wall, he thought catching a ball was normal here. Maybe. I don't know, I'm just assuming, because it was easier to catch, right? So maybe think about how that sank in and find another route where it's a more natural way.
Yeah. An interim step, to have the wall there to be helpful. I know when the child was learning to walk, that little boy, and he was on his knees at first, and he got up from his knees. So like he was kind of like walking on his knees as an interim step to then push up and get on his legs, on his feet. So sometimes an interim step is good. But it sounds like he has a lot of self-acceptance. Some children and perseverance, because some children would be, I know my daughter's dyslexic because she didn't know the alphabet until she was in 5th grade. And, I would try to get her to spell certain things, like I would just something simple like okay, right? But she had so much self-judgment by then that she didn't want anything to do with language. She just knew she wasn't good at it. You try to do any exercise, anything with language, and it was like just toxic. Okay. And your son, even though it's remarkable actually that he was not performing to the rest of the kids, but had the perseverance and had enough self-esteem to stick with it and do it without being turned, oh, I'm not good at this, I don't want to even try. And he just kept trying. And so that's really an important component of learning, and it sounds like he is learning it. You see, that's the fun. Catching the ball was fun, and learning was fun. And as long as he's not feeling judged, he's going to learn it.
That's it. And just to wrap up on that, so Michael's made another point in the chat window to say there's a famous story of a baseball player who was hopeless at hitting a ball, and the coach suggested that he hit an imaginary fly that was on the ball, and he hit it very well because he didn't like flies. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So that's another way
Exactly.
of thinking outside the box. Just
Exactly.
as a little-
Awareness, learning, performance.
I just add a little thing to that. From something I saw in one of Tim's demonstrations, in this example of catching the ball, one thing that was important was the condition to catching the ball was you were even catching or not catching. You should be able to do both.
Mhm.
So I guess when you do that, you allow the mistake, no?
Mhm.
Right?
I think that's
Good
really
point.
interesting because I once picked up a book which was I tried to learn how to juggle. I never did because I guess I was trying, but the book said, I think this is very much in line with what you're saying there, was that basically for the first however long you have, just throw the ball in the air, throw the 3 balls in the air and let them drop. And throw them in the air and let them drop. And the focus is letting them drop. And then it said, once you're bored of that, then try and catch them,
Interesting.
which I thought was funny. Anyway,
Fantastic.
Well, I'll work on your juggling, Alistair. We'll do an inner game
that.
of juggling.
we'll do it live in the
Yeah.
next session.
It's a good
Yeah.
challenge. Try the in-game stuff.
Yeah, I did that with frisbee. I could spin it now and twist it around.
I think
Bounce it on my
I may have
nose.
the balls right. I think I may have them here somewhere.
Okay. You guys don't mind if I work with Alistair a little bit here?
Be my guest.
We'll do that in the next session. I've got a pack.
Yes. Yes. Oh, it's getting late.
Alice is off to the Maldives, if I'm not mistaken. Oops, it didn't just come
Okay.
out. Sorry.
Getting away from some of the rain and
Don't blame you.
Well,
So
this
Yeah,
has
so-
been a lot of fun.
this has been fantastic. Jeffrey, Alistair, thank you so much for your time. And thank you everyone for attending. This community is all about learning, and it's all about you and you know, and these great speakers. Coming up are so many other fantastic talks about what Agile can do for the future. So we are going to somehow find ways to incorporate AI and all the other great trends that are actually showing up in 2024. But just don't forget, as part of the inner game, go through the world of discovery, have lots of fun, keep learning, and grow that excitement. I'll see you guys soon.
Yes. Thank you. And stay in touch. Stay in touch. We want to hear
Stay in
from
touch.
everyone. We want to keep the conversation going here because you're the first ones in the world, in the Agile world, really, that are hearing about this. So,
An honor.
Fantastic.
yes.
Perfect.
Okay.
Guys.
Lovely
Thank you.
meeting you all.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Bye, 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 bye.
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 Bye-bye.